There we go. All right, we're on. Sorry, we are a tiny bit late. Technical problems as usual. Once again, don't ever use Google Hangouts. I think they're phasing this thing out, actually. I think I read Danny had tweeted something that they're like, I don't even know how we're going to do this in the future because Google Plus is kind of phasing some stuff out. But yeah, anyway, figure that out when the time comes. Got John, got Clint. How you guys doing?
Yeah, doing pretty good.
Pretty good.
So, what have you guys been up to in terms of manga? I'm gonna kind of share some info online, get people noticing that we're here. So feel free, the floor is yours. What's going
Give me
on?
just half a second to close this door into this office.
I have not been up to much. I mean, new chapter of Teppu came out, which is a series I've been pretty fond of lately. It's like an MMA seinen series. And then, of course, we're off Golden Week, so I've been reading all the new chapters of everything that came out. Been pretty pleased with all that, the big three and Toriko and other things.
Yeah, I think that we'll probably get to those in particular. I hate to always be dominated, like have our conversation dominated by Big Three, but at the same time, there's a reason they're called the Big Three. They always happen to have the biggest talking points every single time. I'm sure there's other stuff that we can mix in there though. So, what about you, John? What have you been reading?
Mostly the same old stuff. I just caught up on Assassination Classroom, at least everything that's in English so far.
Cool. I haven't.
Hmm.
I just, for some reason, I kind of drop off the face of the earth when a series, the scans fall behind. And it's not, again, like I'm never critical of the scan group. It's a huge job, and I understand that. It's just,
Yeah.
for some reason, the knowledge that I don't get to be caught up, it just kind of takes it away from me.
Yeah, I don't. I think they might. I'm not sure which chapter just came out this week,
It was
but
like 89, wasn't it?
89. Well, then in that case, they're only a week behind now. So.
Yeah, well, sort of, yeah. That's true. You're right. Not bad. That's
Yeah.
that's a tricky one too. Assassination Classroom, wordy puns, etc. Not Gintama level, but it's close.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So before we knew that you were actually going to be here for sure, although I knew yesterday, but you weren't around just a little bit ago, and John certainly didn't know that you weren't going to be on, or that you were going to be on. Um, he was suggesting, like, as though it was just going to be a conversation between him and myself, just suggesting that we only talk about God Usopp. So, top story of the week, is that all we go on here?
I mean,
Fair to me.
that was pretty good.
Yeah, that was great. I loved it.
God, Usopp. I wonder what his bounty's going to be after we finally come out of this arc.
Do you know, I was actually saying to my girlfriend, wouldn't it be the most amazing thing in so many different ways if his was the highest bounty after all is
That's
said and done?
that's what I was just thinking. Like, what if his bounty is higher than Luffy's after this arc?
For no conceivable good, legitimate reason, strictly because someone is petty and then someone else. I mean, the setup's all there. It's perfect. Doflamingo's being petty, Doflamingo's upset, and Fujitora sees it and he reports it. Or Strawberry. Vice Admiral Strawberry's there too.
I mean, he kind of has a cult built up around him now on the island. So, dangerous revolutionary God Usopp.
That'd be so great.
And then there needs to be a scene of Enel with that poster being like, what?
That guy that I zapped, that guy.
He's a god now? What the hey?
All right. So already, who we have chiming in? First of all, Bob Squab is here. Hey, thank you for dropping by. I was just reading some chapters of Again. It's suddenly gotten ridiculously hot-blooded. I would like to request a topic. This is a separate thing. Beelzebub side story. I read that this week and have no idea how to feel. I was going to bring that up, but thank you for doing that anyway. First of all, Again, I wasn't actually aware that we had scanlations of that. I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised by that. I will have
Yeah, we have at the very least the first chapter, which I read.
Nice. Did you enjoy it?
I don't know. It felt weird. I mean, if we're going to talk about it, like, are we going to talk about it at length?
At length, probably not, because I haven't read it. I doubt that John has, but I mean,
No, I haven't.
Okay, so like
Whatever.
then briefly, like it felt very weird. It to like go back to a series with like like a less important focus on it almost. It almost felt as though like things that were happening weren't really important, which made like the manga like even though the enjoyment was still there, like the comedy was still on point and the characters were all fine. It felt like less important, so it felt like why am I really reading this?
Oh, that's kind of too bad. I don't know. I have an irrational bias for series that are under like scanlated. It's totally unfair, and then sometimes, actually oftentimes, unfortunately, it ends up letting me down because this thing that I've been building up in my mind as I tabulate all my little spreadsheets with a table of contents, and I kind of am aware of things for the longest time, even without actually getting to read them. And then I've built this image in my head of like, oh man, finally I get to read this thing I've been waiting for so long, and it turns out to be like Happy Project or something like that. It's actually isn't very good. Damn. But Bob Squab says they're up to about chapter 80, and yeah, I'm like 50 chapters in. It's 50 chapters in. Excuse me. It's definitely weird but interesting. So cool. Thank you. I'll check that out. I will look into that soon. I presume it's pretty easy to find, so I'll definitely give that a read. And Samu is also here. Good evening. Big Three was nice this week. Bleach was great. One Piece was hilarious. Naruto was also hilarious in its own way. It's a fair assessment. Yeah, Big Three.
I
Big
just
Three.
forgot what happened in Naruto.
Flashback. Team 7.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
We get shown Sasuke's better character from when he was 11 years old and just hated the world, and I don't particularly like anything, I think was the line that he gave as his younger self that at least made me laugh, as opposed to now when he's just distasteful all around.
We had a conversation about this because we were laughing at that. It was the flashback in Naruto was, I mean, okay, credit where it's due. He understood the point of the flashback, and Kishimoto did. What are you trying to do with this is give some circularity to the whole thing. How do you do that? You kind of quickly bullet point what each character was when they were younger. All right, I get that. I'm fair enough. Whether or not you want it to happen, that's another matter, but okay, I get the point. But because of that, you have to kind of rush through each of those points. So Naruto's, oh, I'm excitable, and then Sakura, I love Sasuke and all this stuff. And then Sasuke was just like, oh, I hate everything. And I told you this at the time, and I still feel the same way. He is just Garfield. I hate manga.
Sasuke's never met a lasagna he doesn't like. No, that's Choji. Sorry.
He loves lasagna and he wants to kill his brother. That's pretty much all there is to his character.
That is literally Garfield. I remember that distinctly from the comic strips.
Yeah.
So you're saying that Itachi is Odie?
Ooh,
That's what
okay.
you're saying.
Yes. So then, what's John? What's the John parallel?
Madara?
It has to be something to where if you took Sasuke out of the story, it would be hilarious. Does that then make John Naruto?
No, I mean he appears in the comics, so
Yeah.
no,
Good point.
can't be.
Orochimaru? No.
Might work. Ebisu Sensei. There you go. Just a manga about him being like a weirdo pervert. No, but it was a really weird Big Three week, wasn't it? Because last week, well, okay, 2 weeks ago for the double issue, it was really great. Honestly, I still stand by that. One of these may have been an anomaly, but I really enjoyed all 3 chapters last time around, last issue, not last week. And this time around, last time I said I haven't seen it in so long where all 3 are so good. This week I can say I haven't seen it in so long, if ever, where all 3 of them were so disparate and divergent and completely different. And I'm sure that a lot of that is personal subjective opinion, whereas I loved One Piece and didn't care for Naruto, and Bleach was just weird. And I didn't dislike it. I liked it. It was just, I mean, raise your hand, please, if you want to come out as a liar in saying that you saw the brain in a jar thing coming.
Yeah, that was... I mean, I guess
That was really odd. Nice mustache, by the way. Let's talk about that.
Oh,
That's
thank
better
you.
than Naruto, right?
It's my Dressrosa disguise.
That's pretty good, actually. You have to say something so this thing is so broken. I'm supposed to be able to like put the camera on you, but it doesn't work.
Really?
Yeah. So anytime you want to draw attention to yourself, you have to actually verbalize.
Well,
Yeah, I don't know. What do you
I'll
guys
just
think
make
about
sure to everything I say. I'll twist the mustache a little bit.
Be some old cartoon villain?
It's that Dick Dastardly. That was his name, I think.
Yeah. All right. So what do you guys think of the big three?
I thought Bleach was good. I want to see where it goes. Bleach never moves fast enough for me anymore, it seems. We have entire chapters go by where we'll get like 5 words. It's mostly just like empty panels of characters either doing things or standing around. And I'm still enjoying it. But man, I just wish I wish Bleach chapters had a little more substance to them.
I kind of agree. Which is, it's odd because I still remember distinctly. I still have that feeling. Unfortunately, kind of the default way that my brain instinctively reacts to Bleach, just like the concept of Bleach, is unfortunately still negative based on what we went through in Hueco Mundo and everything around that. And then superimposed over top of that has been like all the really cool stuff that we've gotten in the last few years, 2-3 years or so. So torn between those, I'm just like, I really want Kubo to keep doing it right and keep putting the story through the proper paces and feature the right characters, and he's done it. He's shown he can do it. He's shown he can introduce these really interesting characters and good fights. And if you kind of, if this was a monthly series, I guess is a way of putting it, imagine everything that happened in like one fight, like the entirety of the Kenpachi Gremi fight, for example, was one monthly chapter. It would be amazing. But I agree, it's like it's the pacing. It's just kind of like, please give me a little more. It reminds me a bit of the conversation we had last time about pacing and cliffhangers, and is there something that you feel is wrong about the way that the rate of information is streamed at us, and the way that every single time there always has to be something to entice the readers to come back. And with him in particular, with Kubo, I feel that very strongly, where I'm interested completely. I really care about what's going on, but just give me a little more quickly.
Yeah, even though whenever I step into a Bleach conversation, I have to, amend it with the fact that I have huge gaps in my knowledge. But I mean, even just looking, I've been reading it for, I guess, maybe the past year or so, pretty much ever since I started, doing this stuff with you guys, and it really has been weird, sort of like ups and downs, weird sort of peaks and valleys, like you said. Like this week, Kenpachi, he was just like standing there with like same expression on his face in the same position for about 10 pages, maybe. And like things were kind of happening, but like they could have been moving more at the same time. It exists in a weird place sometimes.
It's kind of weird too, because in a way, despite the fact that we're all calling this out as a fault, at the same time, it kind of fits with the whole Bleach style thing that we always harp on about how it's cool and really composed and calculated, and Ichigo's different from the other shonen protagonists because he has this aura of capability about him, and he's more intelligent than we're used to. And I mean, this actually kind of does fit in with that. I think that maybe Kubo's just gone a step too far, not like a leap too far. It's not way away from what it should be. It's just a little bit. You just give us a little bit more than what we have right now.
Yeah, because it wasn't egregious. Just sort of like didn't exactly whet the appetite, I guess.
Well, and this week we were just disarmed by a brain in a jar.
And that's another, like, when you think about it, it kind of works, but it is still a little.
Yeah.
I almost said the word jarring, but I stopped myself just in time.
Well done. Bob Squab suggests, I want to add him to the tier list, just I presume this is Gremmy, just so his picture can be the brain in the jar. Rest assured, whenever we do get back to the tier list, like it's a combination of burnout and lack of suitable information, suitable research facilities for that. But more primarily, frankly, it's just kind of burnout. It's a pretty negative project externally. Internally, we have a blast doing the tier list, but externally, it's it draws so much negative attention. It's not really worth it when we're dealing with it. But rest assured, if and when we ever do return to the tier list project, yeah, definitely. That's just too good to pass up.
I was kind of up in the air about whether or not he was still alive too. Like, is he just still like there, like able to fight?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's
Actually,
true. If he is just a brain in a jar, then what? How was his body an issue?
Yeah.
he can't really have been defeated if this is the case. Are we supposed to honor that he's like reached some kind of new level of understanding or something to where he doesn't want to fight? 'Cause I didn't fully get that.
Brain dead, I guess.
You're killing
Sorry.
me. All right. Samu, renowned Bleach fan, well versed with the rationale of Kubo, speaks for Kubo. I think Kubo writes for his last pages, if that makes sense. He seems to limit himself to something in particular each chapter. That's fair. That's a completely fair assessment. I mean, I think what we're just saying is maybe it's a little bit too much in that writing style, but I think you're spot on. I think that is the writing style.
Yeah, I think he does have a very distinct style, like to himself. That not every author really has that. Not every author writes in a way that their chapters have a flow and a point and a theme. And Kubo definitely has that to his. There's always a note at the end of the chapter, as though like most of the chapter was leading up to this. And our problems with it in Hueco Mundo were largely based around the fact that most of the chapter was leading up to a twist, which just it can't be led up to. And it was very tiresome to just every week twist, 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 twist. But yeah, I think that the chapters having like a central theme and leading into that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and that's what we've been seeing for a while now. But it does make it flow kind of slowly, and it does like limit you to like one idea per chapter, whereas you might want more. Whereas a One Piece chapter may have 5 or 6 ideas throughout the chapter of like plot and what's going on and what characters are up to.
5 or 6 ideas in the first page. He's been going crazy stuffing that content in for a little while now.
Yeah, occasionally you'll hit a page that has like words, just words, words, words all down the page, like the kind of thing I would have expected from like Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei.
Yeah. One last note on Bleach before we transition elsewhere, though. If we flip it the other way around, to look at it as a positive, you could absolutely say that regardless of pacing issues and the delivery of information and how much content you pack into each chapter and all that, you really get a distinct impression every single week. Oh, I've definitely read a Bleach chapter. I know exactly what happens. That one idea per chapter, okay, maybe it's not enough for everyone's taste, as we're saying here, but you really get a very strong impression of that idea every single week. You know fully what Kubo wants you to know. So the author basically, I guess is the best way to look at it, is the author has you where he wants you. And I don't mean that in some kind of like weird sinister way, of course. But very, very specifically, I mean, he is able to control his audience in a good way, meaning that nothing is really left to the imagination. And again, I mean that in a good way. Now, these all sound like negatives, but I genuinely mean this positively. He has us in a position where he's able to tell the story exactly as he sees it in his own mind, and we're not missing any of the details. Everything is coming out very clearly. One Piece, though, I mean, what do you guys think that that's cool, though? I mean, I love the amount of information that we get every single week. I think it just makes everything feel that much more important and huge and chaotic and whatever it's supposed to feel at the time. But do you guys like that?
Yeah, I think it's been really good. I think the recent chapters with One Piece have had a lot to process, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it keeps you thinking about stuff. You don't get bored reading a chapter. You don't scan through pages quickly and move on to the next. You're kind of focused on the content. Um, and I also think that he's been doing it in a way where like he's been overlooking a lot of the crew members. And I say that, and it would normally sound like a counterpoint, like, oh, it's not so good because of this, like that's a bad thing. But I think it's actually worked to its favor. Like we've been worried for a long time about there being too many crew members, about there being certain crew members who shouldn't be on the crew, namely Brooke and Frankie, I think are the ones we have the largest opinions against. Um, and I think largely glossing over them and just giving them parts when applicable, and giving more time to the other characters like Luffy and Zoro and Usopp and Robin and Nami, or to a much lesser extent though, um, has really done the series well, because those are the characters that we kind of really need to see during these important parts, during like the reintroduction of Sabo.
I wonder if, and this is more of a devil's advocate kind of thing, because obviously I love One Piece to death, but I wonder if it says something that, I mean, half the crew has been missing for, weeks in terms of, just real time, and the story hasn't really suffered. Like, I don't feel like I'm missing anything. And on the one hand, you could probably say that that's good. He hasn't organized the events of, or at least this part of the story, in such a way that now that half the crew is gone, that they feel absent. But I mean, I guess it kind of swings both ways. I guess at least he didn't show them doing anything that were sort of wanting more. Like he sort of left them on there they are sort of note, instead of having them be in the thick of some wacky predicament. But I think you could probably make an argument either way about whether or not that's really that positive of a thing.
It's an interesting thought to look at it in, like, as an offshoot of what you're talking about. If all these other crew members that aren't being featured right now were being featured to a little bit more of an extent, and just a little bit more, not a lot more, meaning they don't get a full big climactic fight, or that's constantly being interrupted. Like, for example, think about what we've seen with Usopp and Robin. Imagine if every single character got something like that. We were constantly bouncing back and forth looking at all these different characters. First of all, I think that would lead to the one worry. It's not been so much a complaint because it hasn't really happened, as it is a worry that we've had since before the time skip. The crew's getting pretty big. Every single arc's getting longer because everything has to feel more important. So we're really going to pad everything out here, and the crew being as big as it is just going to take forever to get through all these fights. So we've always been worried about the arcs that we're getting right now, these New World arcs, exactly how well they would be paced and whatnot. And if we were getting that to the fullest extent, that would take a bit too much time. It'd be a bit tedious. Okay, so we don't have that. So first of all, that's a good thing. But right now, as those characters are like Nami, like Brooke, etc., Chopper especially, they feel unfulfilled in a way that can completely be salvaged and redeemed, to where it looks like Oda has intended this all along. And who's to say he hasn't? I mean, I'm willing to give him full credit that's completely what he has planned. Whereas if they were a little bit more involved than they are right now, I don't think that impression would be there quite as strongly. I think it would be more a case of, well, that just didn't end up being a very good arc for Nami, let's say, to pick one out of the hat. It wasn't really a very strong Nami arc. Hopefully she'll get her time to shine in the future. Rather than, oh man, I know she's been doing stuff, and I didn't really get to see her. I'm looking forward to whatever she does next. I'm looking forward to whenever she does get to be featured. I think they're in a decent place, which is not at all to say I don't want to see them featured in this arc. I still hold out some hope that they will be, but with the crew as big as it is, they just simply can't all be featured in every single arc, and the arcs still remain paced well. With that in mind, I would like to see each of the different crew members, permutations of them at least. I mean, obviously Luffy has to be primarily involved in every single one. Zoro is always going to get his big sword fight. There are little notes that Oda has to hit every single time. But that aside, he can pick and choose which ones to feature more prominently in such a way as he's doing now, to where it's not so egregious that they're missing. It's more that they're going to get their chance, because we all know Oda as an author. We know he's going to bring these characters back, and they're going to get equal fair treatment at some point, even if it's not timed the same. They'll get their just due. They'll get what they deserve at some point. That's what differentiates this situation from so many other situations in other series, whereas these characters are, Naruto is the prime example, really. all the side characters from the Chunin exam. Oh man, I love Shino's ability, and Kiba can do this stuff, and Tenten is there. And we could, there's so much more we could do with all of these characters, and yet Kishimoto just never did. And there was never that sense of confidence that he ever would do that. So then it became a negative. It became a complete outright negative of just, you had these ideas and then you threw them by the wayside, rather than you had these ideas and you built it up over time.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think comparing those two series specifically is a good example of how to do the large cast effectively and how to clearly not. I mean, I was bringing up that point just because I do think it exists, but I definitely think that out of the I'm sure there's more than two ways you could handle it, but out of the two ways we just mentioned, obviously the way Oda's been doing it is the way that works.
Well, I mean, it's the way that works given the current parameters, but I'm not trying to say that Oda is completely infallible and did it the 100% right way. If you ask me, the way to do it would have been to stop the crew from growing past certain points earlier in the series and feature that combination, that size of a crew, for a bit longer. I mean, I thought that the five-man crew should have lasted a little bit longer than it did, and then the seven-person crew should have lasted a little bit longer than it did, and I thought 8 came too quickly, 9 came too quickly. So certainly, in my personal opinion, Oda is not without fault with regard to that. But with the current situation as it is, I think he's doing quite well. All right, so that's kind of our look at the big three, which I suppose we have to do every time because stories. I want to touch on the thing that Bob Squab brought up, which is the Beelzebub side story. Have you guys read this yet?
Yeah, I did.
Isn't it something about babies?
It is something about babies. All right. All right, so Beelzebub, we had been following it for the longest time. It was one of our favorites to continuously go back to. Mix of great action, good delinquent stuff, great comedy, amazing straight man material there. Furuichi, one of the best in the business, absolutely top of the chart in terms of that, alongside Shinpachi. With us for a long time, a little bit of a limp ending, but it was still mostly enjoyable. And now it's over in Jump Next, and it's a kindergarten comedy where BL has to get 100 friends, and it was all about the main characters becoming babyfied. It's like a babality, if you guys remember that. I think that little bit only lasted for one chapter, so the premise, it just kind of helped to kickstart the premise, which is BL has to make 100 friends, and it's just going to be presumably more of the comedy, less of the action. What'd you think of it?
I think Beelzebub lived and died, I guess you could say, on its ability to mesh action and comedy, and I think going largely comedy is almost making it into sort of a gag series. It's certainly closer than it was, and I don't know. I didn't really enjoy it as much as the original.
I mean, as much as the original, without question, no. But that's because it's more because I love the original than I hated this. I didn't hate this. It was just really odd because of how much of a departure it was. Not in terms of the style of comedy. I mean, his comedic timing is the same as it ever was. The kinds of jokes that he'll use, the kinds of scenarios that he sets up, it's basically the same as ever. It's just the knowledge from the initial setup here that there's not really going to be any opportunity for action. And in fact, it's even more than that. I realized mid-sentence. It's more than what we see in the first chapter. It's simple common sense. It's logical thought. If there was going to be any more serious content, if there was going to be more serious demon plot and people trying to take BL's power and people trying to defeat Oga, then why would you end the original series and jump? Why suddenly stop it, wait a little while, and then give it a spin-off? So clearly, logically, aside, and then also in addition, looking at everything we saw in the first chapter of this spin-off, we know it's going to be primarily comedy. And on one hand, I'm fine with that, and going along with that, I just missed Beelzebub so much that it's kind of nice to see the characters again, but it's just, I think this is going to be a case where you can't capture lightning in a bottle twice. This is just not going to work again. I'm perfectly fine with the first chapter for what it is. I just think it's every single time I read it, whenever this comes out. I think it's a monthly. I'm just gonna feel it's like something's really missing. It's gonna be lacking something that made the original as good as it was. And I don't want to understate that. I really, really like the original. And all right, Bob Squab chiming in on that. It didn't really even feel like it had a premise. It was just like, here are the characters again. Yeah, that is basically what it was. It was nostalgia, which is really strange because it didn't end that long ago. It's really odd to be nostalgic for something that is really recent.
Yeah, that is exactly what it felt like. Which is it's really weird in a couple levels. Like you just mentioned, it's hard to be nostalgic for something that was just running. And also, it's really weird to feature a manga and be like, "Here's all your favorites back again by popular demand," except it was canceled because it wasn't popular. So like, why is this happening?
Yeah. I don't know if this is just another casualty, another example of the tension between the fan voting system and what the editors want, or something like that. And who am I to say? I don't have insider information, but it is really just bizarre to cancel a series and then turn around and give it a spin-off. It made sense for something else, which had basically exactly that happen to it, which was Kiriko-san, Shinmai Fuke Kiriko-san, which ran for 20 something chapters in Jump and got canceled. But by the end of its run, it happened to find a bit of an audience. It kind of found itself first. It kind of figured out what kind of series it wanted to be, what its strengths were as a series, and it also happened to find a little bit of a niche audience. So then they made a spin-off in, I don't remember if it was Jump Next or Square, but one of the Jump monthly magazines. That's perfectly fair because it's a series that failed in one respect but succeeded in another. You found an audience of some kind. Let's give you and that audience room to breathe in a different setting that makes more sense. But here, Beelzebub was at heart a purely Jump series. It was so completely representative of everything Jump is all about. It completely encapsulated all those Jump themes and elements. And it ran a long time, and then it was axed and brought back. It's really unusual. I mean, is the length of time a factor for you? Like if it had been like a year or something, and then the spinoff came out, would that make a difference, or would it still be odd?
It still feel odd to me. It just didn't. If you're gonna cancel a series, then cancel a series, and if you're gonna continue to let it run, continue to let it run. But you don't remove it from the magazine and then hack part of its appeal off and then put it back in. That just it's weird.
Yeah. There are also plot elements that do make it feel a bit strange because, in as much as the plot was resolved technically, the fact that it was canceled means that I still have a little bit of an unresolved feeling for Beelzebub. I was expecting as a reader prior, when I was in the midst of reading it weekly, I still had this grander idea of where Oga was going to go as a character and how much stronger he would get, what kind of challenges he would have to face when he goes back to the demon world, which we never got, by the way, and how much BL would grow. So there's all of that in play, as far as what I still expected them to do and how much I expected them to grow. And now we're being treated this kind of like greatest hits parade where the characters are being trotted out as finished products, which on one hand makes perfect sense because they are finished products. The original series is done, but on the other hand, it doesn't mesh at all with what and I assume a lot of other people thought was going to be the case, which is like many other shonen series, they were going to continue growing and getting stronger, and the jokes would ramp up in their absurdity for Furuichi and whoever else is involved. Everything basically across the board would grow in unison, and that didn't happen, and yet we're getting this sense that, well, they're done. Here they are. Here are your favorites. It's awkward. Bob Squab also sharing, to me it felt weird because they announced the spinoff with the ending. I was expecting some kind of continuation. Yeah, everything about this is just really strangely done. I can't say I expected a continuation, and I think that would have been even stranger as much as I would have liked it. I think it would have been even stranger to move magazines for that, especially to Jump Next. You would think that would go to Square if that was the case. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's really it's really bizarre. I'll still read it. I mean, I'm gonna read this thing monthly, and not just because, I run this site and I have to do this because I need to be informed. I'll happily read it. It's just it's gonna have that cloud hanging over it of what could have been and what we're missing. John, what have you been reading? I know you were gonna do the Titan review. Want to talk about that at all?
Um, yeah, it was not as good as the last chapter. Kind of got, well, I don't know. Do you guys both read Titan?
I just caught up an hour ago.
Nice. It got, I don't know. It got a little talky, little too talk heavy for me, but it wasn't horrible. I'm gonna need to bring it back up. I don't know. Like it takes me a few reads to really get it stuck in my head.
Just to clarify, in case anyone didn't understand exactly what I meant, I'd be surprised, but I am talking about Attack on Titan, Shingeki no Kyojin. Should completely clarify in case someone... Alright, what'd you guys think of the latest Titan AE?
That was a good movie.
Yeah. I have an incredibly difficult time, and I've mentioned this in context of a lot of other series that are monthly. I have an incredibly difficult time staying invested in monthly series, and it's not at all based on quality. It's just based on the rate at which I get to read the chapters. And what you're talking about with this chapter being really talky, that's when it loses me. And again, I have to re-stress what I just said. It's not for quality issues. It makes sense that the chapter was talky. With the scenario at hand, it's perfectly appropriate. But man, it just if I've waited a month for the hypothetically, I know I just caught up, but hypothetically I've waited a month to get to just more conversation. This is kind of completely the opposite of what I was saying about Kubo and Bleach, where there's that one idea, and by God, if nothing else, for all any other faults and whatnot, you are going to know that idea inside and out by the time we're done with this chapter. I wait a month for a chapter and I get dialogue. I know what's going on, but in 2 weeks' time, 2.5, 3 weeks' time, I'm gonna basically have forgotten. Oh yeah, there's some kind of thing going on with the royal family. I'm gonna forget the details.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of situation in which, I mean, one could argue that when you only have once a month, that when you have a portion of the story that's very information, very dialogue heavy, that you need to cram it in there. But I think that because time is already sort of against you with the whole once a month thing, I think you're way better off just spreading it out through a few chapters and making those chapters more interesting. I mean, it's sort of the opposite of like the Band-Aid theory, where you just like rip it off and it'll hurt less. In this case, when you do that, it just makes it can make it that much more dissatisfying, because I mean, again, it's the wait. You wait so long, and then you're reading through the chapter, and you're still reading through the chapter, and it just sort of drags on. It makes, not only does it make the wait the wait that you just went through feel less worth it, but it makes you less. You don't look forward to the next wait as much.
Yeah, it's not one ruined month. It's more two ruined months, because then you have to just sit there in kind of like negative anticipation of, oh man, coming up soon. I do want to know what happens, but I expect to be let down again, basically. Yeah,
And they kind of brought it there at the end, but just a few pages right at the end of a chapter doesn't quite do it.
There's two big things with regards to that for me. First of all is the kind of series that it is, which is there are certain other series, and one of which I will give you a clear example momentarily, but let me say this first. There are certain kinds of series that are better suited to these kinds of chapters and this kind of content as an overall arc, where we're divulging all this kind of insider information, and it's all suspenseful, and try to find to distill it down to bare bones themes that you could apply to so many different plot situations. It's kind of the whodunit, or it's the mystery, or it's the who's working for whom, or that kind of a suspenseful thriller scenario. not everything can do that too well. Shingeki no Kyojin, I'm not sure really falls into the camp that can do it really well. It can do it fairly well because of the mystery of the world. That's been such a big draw for the entirety of the series. But it's been a draw supported by, or maybe even supporting, people getting killed by titans and titans fighting each other and flesh being torn limb from limb. Tons and tons and tons of horrific action. And to suddenly go from that to this, the stark contrast of this, where everyone's just kind of in back rooms talking and tricking each other into confessing secrets and whatnot. It feels like a different kind of series. The biggest test, though, for me, is before fully criticizing something, you have to make sure that it's something that you're not holding to an impossible standard, by which I mean, if we look at this and say, oh, I've waited a month, again, hypothetically, I've waited a month for this chapter, I feel let down by it based on the kind of chapter it was and based on what was presented in that chapter. So first of all, let me test myself to make sure I'm being fair about that. Am I being fair? Is there another series that has done this exact thing properly? Well, the answer is yes, Fullmetal Alchemist. I mean, it's same sort of scenarios. Of course, it's a vastly different setup for the plot, and the themes are different. But there were a vast number of FMA chapters that had this kind of information, backroom political dealings and all of that, that managed to hold my attention excellently, perfectly well. I was completely engaged month to month. FMA is totally a high watermark, completely a perfect example for why Shingeki no Kyojin is, in some accounts here, failing, at least in one or two respects. Some would like to agree. I agree this current arc does not fit in with SNK. It's just not what to expect from it. I'm just waiting for the action to return. Well, there you go. That's it right there. It's so divergent from what we're used to. And first of all, I'm not at all saying that Samu is saying this. Speaking for myself, I'm not saying that it should only be an action series. All this other plot is meaningful and necessary. Without it, I think it would actually be a pretty boring series. If it was just giants punching each other, that wouldn't be all that great. You get over it pretty quickly. We need the intrigue and all the suspense behind the mysteries of the world and the titans and what was in the basement and all that stuff. It's all important, but it's how to distribute it. It's what's the ratio, what's the balance, and we're definitely skewed on the wrong side right now. I think you were about to say something after the FMA comparison?
Well, it's just, in a series like this and a series like FMA, you've got a lot of cogs moving, right? All sort of in unison. Things are all happening, but and that sort of like big picture is interesting, but you go focus in on one cog, one. Don't want to go too far with this metaphor, but one cog turning, it can't hold your attention. It's not that interesting, and sometimes you have to do it, but you just can't do it for that long.
That's a really interesting comparison specifically because of FMA, because actually we can then turn this towards the protagonists in each series, because I would say that actually Edward Elric, protagonist FMA, is just one tiny cog in the machine. To me, that's kind of the point of FMA, and part of its appeal, at least to me, is that Ed is not this grand savior. He has ability, he is powerful in his own respect, but he's not even close to the most powerful character we know. He is limited, he has faults, he has challenges that either he is incapable of overcoming or simply is smart enough to know not to challenge those because he can trust someone else to do so. He is a cog in the machine, and that's the way the entire plot is set up. Whereas in Shingeki no Kyojin, Eren is the machine, basically. I mean, obviously there's more to it than that, but he is the chosen one. He is the savior. He is the one last hope of humanity. There's so much more riding on his shoulders relative to his story than there was on Ed's shoulders relative to his story. And I think that also goes a long way in determining what kind of chapters are appropriate to each respective series. When we're looking at FMA and all these political backroom, secret, whatever going on with any given character, that's kind of okay, even if it's not Ed, because Ed has roughly equal standing with everyone else. If we're doing that in Attack on Titan, well, Eren is so much more important, it doesn't really work. I'm sorry, like Armin fans and all these other fans, they're great characters, but they're just not as important.
Yeah, if I could weigh in for a second, It's an interesting topic because like I think it's a huge gamble banking your entire series on your main character, and certain series do it to really great effect. One Piece is a series that wouldn't work without Luffy. Everything kind of hinges on him, and he's a great main character. And Dragon Ball, to an even greater degree, really hinged on Goku. Everything in Dragon Ball sort of revolved around Goku, and he was an absolutely magnificent main character. So it all worked. So you like it's a strategy that you're not wrong for taking, like to have everything be about the main character. Naruto might benefit from that, but you can also certainly mess up if your main character isn't the greatest.
Well, do you mean by that that you don't think Eren is the greatest, or do you think that the pressure on him is just too high to where when we focus on something else, it just doesn't work?
I don't think he's lacking as a main character, but I don't think he's the sort of main character who can pull a series by himself. I don't think he can kind of take the plot on his back and kind of shoulder everything the way that Luffy and Goku did.
Yeah, I would agree with that. John, do you feel the same?
Yeah, I would, and to bring Ed into the mix, I think a lot of it has to do with sort of the way that they're tied to the other characters, because absolutely, like Luffy and Goku, I mean, it feeds into one another. Like Luffy is really good on his own, and the series doesn't work without him. But the just the presence of the other characters empowers him in a certain way, and I think that's true for Goku. Um, and for Ed, like the relationships are always there. Like there's always a context in which other people are important, even though that one character may be the most important. Eren, like, and maybe this kind of has roots in sort of the I don't know the darker sort of overall like thematic sense of Attack on Titan, but the relationships there just don't seem as strong, and like now I've kind of lost my train of thought of where I was going with this, but like nothing, he can't carry it on his own, or even though he is that important, because he feels in some ways more detached from everyone else. Am I making any sense? I sort of lost what I was saying there.
No, I get it. I think the relationship aspect is really, really, yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think it's really interesting. And I'd say there is a serious lack in Attack on Titan. You've got Eren and Mikasa, which I think is a really good one. And then what else? Honestly, I mean, if I'm not trying to say that other characters are unimportant, and I'm not trying to say that other characters' relationship to Eren or Mikasa or whoever else, or even amongst themselves, that those are in and of themselves unimportant. But if you were to say, I mean, I said Armin earlier, so just for example, Armin's relationship to Eren versus Eren's relationship to Mikasa. Now, of course, I'm not comparing it directly. It's not meant to be as meaningful of a relationship, so I'm not comparing it in that sense. But in the sense that if I were to read a chapter about Mikasa being worried about the time that Eren was taken away, and then she had to do something to get him back, something, that kind of a plot that would have happened. Some kind of conversation between them, some kind of interaction between them, even if they're not in the same room together, just a furtherance of their relationship. That's a meaningful chapter. That's an important chapter. That's one that we're going to care about. Again, Armin having to do something for the ultimate benefit of the town, or for his squad, or for Eren directly or indirectly. Anything therein. Would it hold your attention? Maybe, maybe not, depending on the context. But it's not on this. It's not on that same kind of level. Not. I don't mean that he isn't as close to Eren as Mikasa is, and that's a mistake. That's totally aside. That's beside the point. The point is, these other characters and these other relationships don't hold the same weight in the story and can't carry a chapter to the same extent. And there just aren't enough relationships like that.
I think I get what you're getting at, and I kind of understand it in the context of like kind of sort of a thought experiment where imagine take two characters from Full Metal Alchemist, Ed and any other side character in the story. Throw those characters in a room together and make the chapter about them spending time with each other. Literally any character in the series would work with Ed because you know how those you know what that character is like, you know what Ed is like, you have a feel for how they interact with each other, and any sort of interactions between them are going to feel really natural and they fit within the world. You could put Aaron with Hughes's wife, or you could put Ed with Hughes's wife, like in a chapter together, even though they're characters with very little person-to-person relation between them, and it can be a very natural chapter where these two characters are interacting in a world that seems realistic, a world that seems like built to a purpose and like realistically. Whereas if you were to take two characters from Attack on Titan without very much relationship to each other and put them together, it would struggle. It would struggle to find something on which they could interact with each other. Like the characters don't tie in. They don't fit into a larger plot line together.
At least not very many of them.
No.
I mean, it really kind of goes like if you look at these characters and take them out of the picture, could the story feasibly continue? And I feel like, I mean, what the three that we've sort of talked about around Titan was, let's say, like Dragon Ball, One Piece, and FMA, right? If you took Luffy, Goku, or Ed, like out of those stories, there just wouldn't be, like it couldn't continue. Like if they were to die in the middle of it, like there wouldn't be enough there, I think, for it to keep going. But when I think about what goes, sort of the world and everything, the setup in Attack on Titan, I mean, it's pretty clear that any one person can be gone and the whole thing keeps going. And I think that, in a way, kind of says it. Like, I mean, you get the sense that everything was still moving even without Aaron. Yes, he's a part of it now, and that's through whom you're seeing all of the events of the story unfold. But he could be gone, like he could die, and I still feel like there would be things to keep going, to keep the story moving. And in a way, that's not what you want. I mean, you've got your main character has to be a little bit more integral to the story, and then going back to where it is now, he's just kind of stuck, and that may be why it seems a little bit unsatisfying, is because he's out of the picture. You're effective, you know, the one you're meant to maybe root for throughout this, and they're gone, and things are still going on without them. It just leaves just kind of a sour taste.
It's just really strange, especially because it's almost as though he doesn't really work with his own world. Because, to me, the prevailing feeling that I've always gotten from the very beginning of Shingeki no Kyojin was bleak. That to me is the number one takeaway emotion, feeling, thought. It's everything is hopeless. It's bleak. It's not actively horrible. Although, I mean, it is. I get that. I say something like that in a vacuum, and it might leave me open for contradiction. But what I mean by that is stress less the horrible and more the active. To me, this is part of the reason why I have such a difficult time accepting the fact that there is an anime to this. Because to me, you can only do this in manga. There's such a just emptiness to everything in that series. It's more a lack of everything that we get in other series rather than seeing those things be taken away. We do see a fair amount of that. We see a decent amount of the awful behavior that goes on and the Titans eating the humans and all that kind of stuff, but to me it's more just a general lack. When we compare, I mean, naturally, we as part of the human race, we read this series from the beginning and it sets us up, oh, this is some kind of human world after the vast majority of it is wiped out. And so instinctively our reader reaction is it's the loss, it's the absence of everything that we understand. That's the basis for the entire story. So with that bleakness as the entire purpose, the entire central underlying core concept of the entire series, to bring the Chosen One in and have him be this golden child that's supposed to fix everything, no matter how many awful, horrible, terrible scenarios and roadblocks you throw up in front of him, it just doesn't exactly work, because you get the real sense, this being a shonen series, and this using so many of the same kinds of cliches and tropes and previous archetypes that it does, which there's nothing wrong with that, it does in certain respects. You get the feeling, well, okay, this is all bad and terrible, and we're going to get through it, and at the end of it, it'll be okay, because he'll find a way. And that sense of comfort is the worst possible thing you could have. So something has to give. Either the world isn't set up correctly, and I feel that's wrong. I feel it is set up correctly. I think it's a great world. It's either that, or Aaron just doesn't exactly work in his own world, because he's too powerful or too much has been made of him. It seems, I mean, that's kind of what we were saying, is that it's a gamble to set up your main character like that. Maybe the gamble didn't quite pay off. Certainly I'm not saying it's a failed series. I mean, in subjective quality terms, I don't think it's a failed series, and in objective terms, I'd be stupid if I said it was a failed series. It's amazingly popular.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got kind of negative there for a little while, but sorry, what were you saying?
I said, you've been to Japan, you've seen that firsthand.
Yeah, it was quite literally everywhere. It is most certainly the hot ticket of the moment. So, but I guess this is a low moment. I don't want it to feel like I'm really just harping on the series, because when it's on point, it really does really well. It just wasn't on point this week.
I would agree with that. I think it feels more magnified than any other series, because, again, it's a monthly. So when a bad chapter comes along, or even, I wouldn't say this was a bad chapter, that's unfair, but when a chapter that doesn't meet your expectations comes along, it feels much worse than it really is. I mean, if we were to, in years' time, reread the entire series in one sitting or a couple sittings and just breeze through this chapter, it might not be the best chapter, but you're going to get to the next chapter or the one after that, whichever one has the meaningful content or the action that we've been waiting for, whatever it is, you're going to get to it quickly enough, and it's not going to feel terrible. There's not really, there aren't any terrible plot-altering decisions made in this chapter. There's nothing that's going to ruin the series. There's nothing that changes fundamentally the character or the setting. It's an absence, again, and this time in a different, and this time a bad way. It's an absence of what we wanted. It's just kind of meandering a little bit here. I don't know. But that said, though, I mean, to spin it a bit more positively, I am actually pretty curious about all the royal family stuff, and the installing a new queen. It's pretty neat. I appreciate the look at this more human, more ordinary life side of things. It's a nice little break. It's a nice little contrast against the hulking titans destroying everything, and how are we going to fix that? But again, I think it's a case of the balance being off a little bit, and it's magnified because it's monthly.
Yeah, it's almost as if it's written. Sorry, I don't want to drag this point out too far, but it is almost as if it's written without sometimes without the self-awareness that it is a monthly. Because you're right, if in a volume, you'd skim through it and it would be fine. So in the context of time is very key here.
Is that just a monthly series problem? Is that basically endemic of anything that's monthly? Because I have the hardest time in the world with something as simple as character names from a monthly series, and it's not at all because they're bad. I really enjoy Claymore. I really enjoy Index and Railgun and Titan. I mean, these monthly series, when I'm reading them, it's enjoyable, but I forget everything about them. Is that me? Is that monthlies? Do you guys get the same thing?
Yeah, I think monthlies that's at the very least that's something that monthlies have to deal with more than anyone else, any other release schedule.
All right. Well, I got a couple tweets here from Samu. Okay, well, sort of. Talking about amazing main characters, Natsu and Fairy Tail. Oh God, don't get me started. That is exactly how not to do it. That is the golden child theory done 100% wrong, where It's not just that here is our chosen savior who will fix everything. At least, I mean, okay, let's continue talking about Titan in that respect, and this is a genuine positive. Yes, Aaron is the center of everything we're looking at here, and he is genuinely fundamentally important. Unlike Ed, he's not just a tiny cog in the machine. He has to do everything for them to live. Okay, fair enough, but Mikasa's doing everything she can. Armin, everyone is doing absolutely everything they can. Fairy Tail, Natsu is the chosen one. He's the golden child. He's got all the power. He can do everything. He's going to be the one to lead us out of this. He's the shining idol of the Fairy Tail Guild. He's going to save the day and win the fights. And everything that everyone else does is inconsequential. That's the big difference. Lucy doesn't even do anything. I think she might have been a bit involved in the most recent couple chapters I haven't read yet. But even if she suddenly turned the tide of battle single-handedly, which I doubt happened, but let's say hypothetically she did absolutely everything, it's still a tiny drop in the bucket compared to all of the times that she started a fight, couldn't do it, side note, was used for fan service, and then literally, not figuratively, literally cried to Natsu for him to save the day, and he saves her. Yeah, that's putting all your eggs in the main character basket completely the wrong way, so... Although I think you just wanted me to rant, didn't you, Samu? Fess up to that one. Own up to it. Side note, did anyone read the Monster X Monster one-shot? I still haven't. I apologize. I said I would, and I have not yet done that. Either of you guys do that?
I read through it.
Is that another one of the Jump one-shots?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's like a Sunday monthly thing.
Huh. Haven't read it.
It's on Manga Stream, so that's where to find it, anyone who's interested. So, John, you read it. What'd you think?
It kind of this might be just because I've lived in Japan for a little while, and then I recently went back to visit. It seems like a Monster Hunter cash-in, honestly. Even though there was a little bit of a, they kind of tried to make it about these two characters throughout the. Monster Hunter is still one of the most popular games over there, and maybe this is probably unfair, but anytime I see a premise like this where hunting monsters is a integral part of the story, I can't help but go, I'd probably rather play the game. But again, that's probably unfair, but there you have it.
I was kind of weirded out by those scenarios where I'm sure that that kind of assessment that you're hypothesizing is unfair, because I'm sure that they have an author, a proper author there, attaching a story to the lore of either the official, the actual Monster Hunter proper, or a world that is deliberately designed, as you say, to cash in on the popularity of something like that. But even if you get the best author in the world to write the most amazing story, why do you have to tag it onto something? Just write your own thing. That always just weirds me out the most. I mean, I'm sure if I'm being cynical, I could just say, well, they're doing it for the name recognition to cash in on the money, to get the established fans. But it's like those superhero movies that change so much about the core idea of a character, where they throw a bunch of things in. I mean, I hear the new Spider-Man does it. I know for a fact Spider-Man 3, the earlier trilogy with what's his name, the young guy. What's his name?
Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire, yeah, that's it. Tiny man. Little toddler Tobey Maguire. In Spider-Man 3, they threw in way too many villains for that one. And you start to wonder when you see any kinds of examples loosely like this, to where if you were just going to do this, if you were going to change things so much, why not just make your own thing? You clearly don't want it for what it actually is. You clearly don't want the actual original thought, the original idea. You clearly don't want what originally made it popular. I mean, there's a reason that you're buying the license for this thing. It's because it succeeded in some capacity, right? It's famous enough for you to want to do this. Have a little faith in what was originally there. You're not smarter than it. So yeah, I haven't read Monster. I don't know if you're supposed to actually vocalize the X like you aren't supposed to do in Hunter x Hunter, but I haven't read that one shot. I will get to that, I promise. Just been behind on that kind of stuff lately. But yeah, I don't know. It's a bit too bad when it's just a cash-in.
The other thing that was kind of weird about it was kind of if it were a whole series and there's clearly a character who's kind of supposed to be the main character. If it were to be a whole series, it might work better because there's this strange kind of almost bait and switch element. But as just a one shot, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It felt sort of backwards, right? So, and also, so I guess I'm not really spoiling a one shot, but there's the loser and then there's the cool guy, right? And the loser, his hands change size constantly. It drives me crazy. Like, he's not supposed to be a sympathetic character, but like sometimes he's drawn like he has toddler hands, and that's all I could, like, as soon as it happened, as soon as I noticed that it was happening more than once, I couldn't help but, that's all I could think about, was I was just looking at his hands and seeing what weird size they were in every single panel.
I've been reading through it since we started talking about it, and the art is not good. I see what the author has tried to do, the artist of the series has tried to do. He's tried to go for that pseudo-realistic sort of, it's like a more lined and detailed way of drawing things, sort of like Berserk does, that sort of art style, sort of like JoJo's does, but he's just not good. And when you try that particular art style and you're not good, it looks particularly terrible.
It looked a little reminiscent of, I can't remember the name of the guy who does Berserk. Crap. Kentaro Miura. Gosh, it seemed like sort of a cross between him and Takahiko Inoue, which
I was
like,
just about to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glancing this over. I will properly read it another time, but glancing over for the purposes of the art, I can see both of your comparisons and a little bit of Young Kyung-il of Defense Devil, Area D, Shinangyo Onji. That kind of like hyper-detailed take on fantasy setting of some kind.
See the tiny hands? His hands are tiny.
I don't think it's bad.
It's inconsistent, I think.
It's just awkward because if you're using this kind of an art style, you are drawing attention to the fact that you're trying to be taken really seriously for your art. And so if you don't completely succeed unequivocally, then, oh my god, that is a tiny hand.
I told you.
Yeah, if you see him hold up his hand in front of his face on like page 15 or something, page 22, somewhere around there, you can see, it's page 22. You can see that either his head is enormous or his hand is tiny. One of the two.
22. Oh wow. Yeah. I mean, alright, he's doing basically like this, which for me, let me bring up the thing so it takes up like...
Oh, it's even worse in the panel beneath that.
Oh my, okay, that's just...
That's where it really got me.
Well, that's kind of comedy though, right?
I think, but
well, he's like
laughing, not taken far enough.
Yeah, it's like not chibi styled. It's still like my main issue with this, and I was saying it was bad, but you kind of clocked in at my actual issue with it. It's drawn in like a hyper realistic manner, and if you're gonna draw things like this, then you have to be spot on every frame, or it looks utterly ridiculous, and that's what's happening.
Yeah. I will say, though, that, like, this is not something I get to say very often, unfortunately. He's not the... I assume it's a man drawing this. I apologize if I'm incorrect. He's not the best at drawing the main character, the other men, but the woman, I don't know if she's a relevant character, the bartender or something this is, she's actually drawn pretty well. Maybe he's better at drawing women than men, which is somewhat of a rarity.
Let's see, what's the name? Tobita, Nikichi Tobita. Sounds like a dude.
Okay.
Not that really means anything, but
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll be curious to actually put this in the context of the story because I'm not. I mean, art is crucial. This is a visual medium. With art does matter, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that the art independently needs to be worthy of being put in a museum. I mean, I hear a lot of people, and here's another one of my little gripes with the Attack on Titan fandom. I hear a lot of the new Attack on Titan fans who have only watched the anime glance at the manga and say, "Oh my God, that's so terrible. The art's horrible." I'm not saying he's a good artist. Again, in a vacuum. I'm not saying that he should suddenly quit his day job and just make these paintings and whatnot and try to get them put in museums. In that sense, he's not an amazing artist. But I will take his drawn art, the distressed, the awkward, the uncomfortable, the awkward, off proportions, everything being visually in a way unappealing. I will gladly take that because it suits the story, because it suits the setting perfectly, over the amazing, gorgeous, beautiful, lush, vivid, richly detailed anime, which doesn't work at all. So bad art, quote unquote, bad art, as long as it's suitable, is perfectly fine. That's the thing. It's how well does it suit the rest of the story? How well does it suit the rest of the series? Rather than just you can't judge any one thing individually. That's not the way that we're meant to interpret it.
yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It works. It works in the context of the story.
That I very, very firmly believe that this is going to sound so rude to the author, and I don't mean it that way, but Attack on Titan never should have gotten an anime. And I'm thrilled for him that it has. Isayama Hajime, I'm extremely happy for him that it has succeeded to this level. That's wonderful. I mean, anyone should have that opportunity at success. So, full marks, kudos to him. I'm, very happy for him. But as a series, that is not something that can work in animation. There should not be fluid motion attached to the bleakness that I talked about earlier. There should not be. There's a soundtrack to this. That's wrong. It should be silence. Why is there music? That's completely wrong.
Silence or screaming.
Yeah. For the purposes of wrapping up Monster x Monster, Samu shares, I don't know if the serialization will have as much focus on comedy as the one-shot, but that's mainly what I took from it. Fair enough. Again, I can't comment on that. How was the comedy used in it? Was it kind of half and half? Was it more comedy?
Is it getting a full series, or is that a maybe?
No idea.
Uh,
I'll check as we talk.
It was pretty standard, I guess. I mean, the comedy was supposed to be in the contrast, but you could kind of, as soon as they introduced the other guy, I mean, you pretty much could see all of the jokes coming, which is fine though. If comedy's not really meant to be, if the series does continue, if comedy's not what it's trying to do, then I don't think it'll be a problem.
Okay. I have not found an answer for this yet. I don't know. Samu, if you know it's getting a serialization, if you could please let us know so I don't have to poke around for that anymore. But I did find, while looking for that, in the Sunday thread on Manga Helpers, I've got a few new OVAs coming from the Sunday side of things. Mushibugyo, Nozo Tokimi, Imawa no Kuni no Alice, and Anelog are all getting OVAs, and apparently there was one of those like big news teasers for Denpa Kyoshi. So as I was reading in this thread, I was thinking, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Someone asks, what is the big news? Scroll down further. Heiji, completely respectable. He runs Manga News, manga-news.com. You can trust his word on it. The big news is drama CD with 12th volume. So, phew, dodged a bullet there. Could have been a lot worse. Denpa Kyoshi. Which did not work ever. Oh, Kokushimuso's ending. Okay, fair enough. Sunday is kind of just a revolving door these days. Check out the last page. Apparently I'm being directed to the very last page of Monster x Monster. Oh, well, there you go. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, it's beginning serialization as announced in the actual chapter. That'll do it.
Well, we'll have to see how it goes.
Cool.
You know?
Yeah, I mean that last page, that big panel spread right there, and the and his attitude and what he says in the panel on the left, you would say that that's got a decent comedy element to it. So whether or not it's funny, who's to say? But that seems to be the point. Thank you very much, Simon. So, what else is there? I don't think this is going to go to the full 2 hours. So before we kind of wrap up here, is there anything else? It's been kind of not really all that much to talk about. Everything's kind of just the same as ever. I mean, if something's been good, it's been good. If it's bad, it's been bad. The one thing that I've really been noticing lately is Toriko, but I have a feeling we're going to talk about that more the next time we get to convene for a Beamcast, which who knows if it's actually going to get to be this Monday, what with holidays. But I didn't realize so many people put that much effort into Mother's Day, but I guess everyone's all into that. It's cool. I guess Mr. T would be happy. Treat your mother right. Yeah, I mean, anything else on any of the other series? Clint, you got anything very long-winded to say about Kuroko?
No. No, I don't.
You don't say. I don't know. Here's something that we continuously argue about, so let's just kind of check in. How's UQ Holder holding up these days?
I haven't read a chapter in like a month. Has a chapter come out in like a month?
It's on Crunchyroll, so yes. Every week. If you were reading it elsewhere, then they would have just stopped scans, probably.
I was reading it elsewhere, but they've been current everything. I think Golden Week, and then the new chapter hasn't come out yet. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
33 must be out. I don't think 34. 33 surely is out. I'll check it. I mean, just in general terms, though. What do you make of that?
I'm still enjoying it. I still like it as a series. I think we're going through some fun arcs. I mean, the last chapter I read was he had started talking to the little girl that they were kind of chauffeuring,
Mhm.
and then she was like attacked, like possibly beheaded or something, like right as the chapter ended. And I was into it. I definitely at that point was like interested in reading the next chapter.
I think it was a step up, yeah. Like she had that little attitude shift or something like that. Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Definitely engaged me more than anything else that the series has done so far, so that's good. Um, I've been enjoying Fuka. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that. I don't feel any reason not to. It's not even an issue of shame. I think it's more I'm just gonna say that while I still can, before it gets terrible. I think that Fuka's doing everything that it needs to do very well so far. Um, it may well be very short-lived given the author in question, but I have to say though, this one feels different. It doesn't feel like the start of Kimimachi. It feels more lighthearted and like there's promise for it to stay lighthearted. There's equal opportunity probably that it could end up being the same angst parade than we've had, but I think this one started pretty nicely and in particular, I have to say I was having a conversation privately with Samu about this, and we kind of had the same opinion. Not that I'm speaking for him, but this is my understanding of it at least. That the gay character in Fuka, so far, and again, this is like 13, 14 chapters in, so far is actually being treated like, golly, amazing thought here, a regular human being, just someone who is actually a person and not someone who is gay for some novelty. So far, fingers crossed it's going to stay like that. So far, that's really cool. I really appreciate that. I hope that continues. I hope that this character will get the chance to do everything that a character of this level of importance would, and it's not just going to be, oh, look, he's off doing his weird gay things because he's gay. I hope that he gets the chance to do any number of just good things. That's pretty cool
Have
so
you
far.
guys
Any other
read?
series? Sorry, what?
Have you guys read Peach Pluck?
I have not still.
It was interesting. Yeah, I mean only the one shot out, but obviously, but it was interesting. It was very weird. like it didn't know entirely what it wanted to do. Like it was almost like it was like presumably it's meant to be a romantic comedy, and that's kind of the path that's obvious. But the first chapter was almost structured in a way where, like, well, do you guys want a mystery, or do you want a romantic comedy, or do you want a battle series? Send in your votes, and we'll make this series into any of those. Like, it was weird. It was like it was setting up to be anything.
Huh. Is that? I mean, it's only a one shot, and I don't. I mean, with all jump related one shots, there's no guarantee, and they actually, I'd have to say, they do a really good job of refining one shots and getting them ready to actually hit publication properly. Is that one that you would want to see turned into a full series?
Um, I don't know that I'm clamoring for that one. I wouldn't mind if it became a full series, but it's not one that I like instinctively want more of.
Okay. Last call on Twitter, by the way, because we're going to wrap up shortly. Any more quick questions or comments, whatnot, get them in right now as we wrap up here. John, is there anything else? Any kind of just loose opinions that you've had lately about manga, stuff that's impressing you or depressing you?
Nothing we haven't really already talked about. It is sort of like a very even keeled kind of week. Nothing rocked the boat one way or the other. So other than God Usopp being just basically the best.
Oh man, I just can't get over people saying, "Oh, I don't like his character anymore." He's so fun. The series would lose so much without Usopp. I literally can't imagine not having him around. It would be so boring by comparison. It's great. He adds so much. I'm happy that he's there, and I'm happy he's being showcased in this way, in his way, in the
In
way
his
only
way.
he can be.
Oh, was it not the best? I think this is the best. This week's been the best Bartolomeo reaction so far. That
Oh,
was.
we got a lot out of the characters this time around. Really, really great interaction, individual moments, and whatnot. I mean, the setup there perfectly between Bartolomeo and Robin. I mean, Robin's role. Robin is just. I love Robin so much as a character. She's wonderful. Robin's complete deadpan, nonchalant. Oh, they're the same person. His name's Usopp. If that were just any run-of-the-mill character, it would be worth a chuckle. But it's because of who she is and what she's been through. The way that Oda is writing her now is just great. She can go either way. She can go incredibly smart, intelligent, tactical, or she can be this perfect comedic straight man character. It works either way. All right, I think it's time to wrap up. I also hear the weather getting kind of bad, so I don't want to have the power go out on us. Samu's final tweet to us is, "Gremmy is in fact a brain in a jar." Thank you. Had to get that in there quickly, of course. All right, guys. So I suppose we've all said everything we want to. So that's it. Thank you all very much for tuning in. We should be back next Friday, assuming we have at least a couple people. It's no fun if it's just me sitting here ranting and raving your ears off. So assuming we have the people for it, we'll be back. And Beamcast on Monday is a slightly trickier proposition because, as I mentioned, Mother's Day, everyone seems to have plans or work. People have that as well. That's a thing. So if we can do one, great. If not, then we'll just get one in as soon as we can. There is plenty to talk about, but, you know, try as we might, sometimes it just seems like we can't get the right number of people together to do a show. But if we can, we will, and if not, then we'll see you next time. And that's it for the stream then. So thank you all very much for tuning in. John and Clint, thank you very much for being here, and I guess we will catch you all later. So good night.
Take it easy.